because we want to then get to areas which the work has already been done. Okay. So when you enter a space like this, there are two things that hit you, right? First is the pond, the water, and the second is the monument. Now, the problem with the world, anywhere in the world, is that even in the United States, 200 billion dollars is given every year in charity. More than 80% of that is to the church. So, a lot of things are given in the name of faith. So, for example, the recent restoration of Swayambhu, 18 kilograms of gold, 18 kilograms. So, no matter how you do your math, 10 grams ko 30,000, so that's 54 million rupees. A lot of giving. So, for example, when you enter a space like this, there are two sides, okay, that you want to conserve. One is the monument, but the second is the water tank. Now, first of all, let's understand the water tank. How do you explain it to local people, why we need to preserve this tank? So, it rains in Kathmandu for 100 days. So, this year, the monsoon, officially in the local calendar, started on June 17th. So, June 17th is the day when, according to our lunar calendar, the monsoon started. So, the rain is supposed to last for 100 days. Okay, so end of September it will stop. Now, the year has 365 days. So the point is, why is a historical city sustainable? Is because it is able to take 100 days of rain and store it for an extra 265 days. So then you have to understand, how does Kathmandu store the 100 days of rain for 365 days? So we'll understand different systems, but one of them is by creating these rainwater harvesting tanks. Now, what function does the tank serve? First of all, it is not for drinking, it's not for washing, it's not for... So there are three functions it serves. First of all, it is to keep the water table high. So for, because it seeps into the ground, it keeps the water table very high. But the second reason that is documented is because if there is a fire or a disaster, so this would be the fire engines of those days. You would have water right in the middle of the city, so that in case of a disaster or earthquake, you would have water. But the third and most important is food security. So if it doesn't rain on time in Kathmandu, we still plant rice on the same day every year. Why? By draining these ponds. So for example, when I was a child, the entire Chhauni barrack was a lotus pond. And if it didn't rain on time, we drained the ponds to irrigate all the land so that we could plant rice on the same day every year. So it gave you the 2 to 3 weeks resilience, before the rains arrive. So food security. So in Europe, for example, the highest ground will be like a castle or a palace. In Kathmandu Valley, the highest ground is always rainwater harvesting. So Bhaktapur, Patan, everywhere. The highest ground is usually rainwater storage. So it allows you to do that. Now, you want to get people to understand that this is very important, so let's preserve it. Okay? So this is one part of the story. Now, like I said, faith-based giving means when you have a meeting, people will first say, let us give to the monument. Because that is a faith-based attitude. Okay? Now, why is this particular monument very important? So there are few meaning 5 of them in Patan that are referred to as Ashok Stupas. Okay. Why are they called Ashok Stupas? Because Emperor Ashoka, he ruled as a Mauryan emperor in the 3rd century BC. So probably the biggest land area of the world was the Mauryan Empire in the 3rd century BC, and he is the person who called the 3rd Buddhist Council meeting in Patliputra, which is present-day Patna. The 3rd Buddhist Council meeting in the 3rd century. Now, his life inspires many things. One of them is to understand the life cycle of a CEO or a corporate chief, okay, in the business world. That's why Ashoka is taught in business school, because it tells the story of a corporate leader. Okay. So 2 things happened in his life. One, he married a very devout Buddhist girl when he was governor of Taxila in Pakistan. So Pakistan ko Taxila dun siya. So he was the governor, and he got married to a very devout Buddhist girl. And this girl would not allow him to even touch his own children until he renounced violence. Unless you give up violence, you cannot touch our own children. The second incident was when he was conquering Orissa in eastern India. And this is the famous Shah Rukh Khan movie, right? So he goes to see the battlefield, and the wounded soldier that he is trying to offer water to says, I would rather die than drink from your house. So these 2 incidents are always recorded in his life. So anyway, so the Shah Rukh Khan movie ends, but the Ashoka history actually begins. So he gives up the sword, he gives up violence. Now, he invents an amazing term called Dharma Vijay. So त्यो शब्द एकदम बुझ्नुपर्ने के छ धर्म विजय. So धर्म विजय भनेको के? So how do you understand the word? It means you don't need to create an empire with a sword. You can also create an empire based on the teachings of the Buddha. So dharma vijay means to conquer, but using the dharma and not the sword. Now to understand the stupa, and this is how you teach business students, is you have to understand McDonald's. So when you're driving in the United States and you see an M, what does it mean? It means A, there is a clean toilet. That's why people stop. Number one reason for to stop at a McDonald's is because of the clean toilet. Number two, you don't have to deal with waiters and waitresses because it will be served with a smile. This is a business model. The third is that the taste, the burger is not the best food in the world, but the taste will be predictable. It will not change from place to place. The fourth thing which they don't tell you is that the seats will be so uncomfortable you will not stay very long. So the turnover is based on the seats being uncomfortable. So this is what management schools teach you as a franchising model. These four things make up the Melbourne franchise. Ashoka in the 3rd century BC also needed an M. Okay. So for him this was his M. Okay, now what we have to understand is the stupa, and I'll explain how the origin of the design came out when we get closer one. So if you look at the decision of the council, it says Ashoka commissioned that the 8 stupas built when the Buddha passed away. So what happened was Kushinagarma, when the Buddha passed away, his remains when he got the flowers, the incense, was divided among the 8 republics that made up North India at the time. So 8 republic, and they made these stupas. So what Ashoka did was dug up the 8 and divided the relics into 84,000 pieces and commissioned his wife, his children, his army, his ministers, everybody to go to the ends of the empire to build the stupas. So out of 84,000 that he commissioned, Patan got 5. Okay, and this is the central one. So Godavari Janam Batuma, you'll see one. Near the UN you'll see one. We'll see one that is on the northern side, and then the eastern one is near Gwarpur, once you cross the ring road. So the city is surrounded by 4 stupas with this one as the central one. Okay? And so 3rd century BC. So this is also where, when you tell people the value of this, you have to be very careful, again, about what we are discussing over Toastmasters, that when you walk, there is history, okay, which has to be told as history. But then there are legends, and then there are folklores, and then there are superstitions. There are so many things. But we have to be able to separate these things. Okay, so what is a legend, what is history? But once we can tell what the history is, then people get it, the value of this. But if you can tell the hydrology, then people get this also. But you cannot just go around saying, let's clean this pond. But if people understand that for 100 days of rain, unless we store it for 265, there's no value for this pond. So now, let's take Colorado. How many days of storage do you think Colorado has? The state of Colorado. 900 days. So 900 days storage when you 3 years. That means the government of Colorado is very corrupt. 365 दिन वर्षमा हुन्छ, and they have 900 days of storage. So that means somebody made a lot of money by contracting too much storage. So कहिले काहीँ छ corruption को indicator also be stored. अब हाम्रो यहाँ 365 दिन भनेको people get it. So हरेक पल्ट हाम्रो watershed बिग्रियो, ढुङ्गा निकाल्यो र ढुङ्गाधारा सुक्यो. That means 30 दिन लाग्दा पानी आएन. So 365 minus 30. So we have to create 30 days of storage. So it should be very simple math. Okay, just keep it in mind. You know what the economics Nobel Prize went for this year? For whom did it go to? This is the tragedy of Nepal.
Nepal's economy?
So Eleanor, she is the professor at Indiana University, got the Nobel Prize for economics. And what was her thesis on?
Over there.
For challenging the Western notion that the tragedy of the commons. So in environmental science all over the world, they teach you the theory of the tragedy of the commons. When something is in common domain, there is a tragedy. But Nepal is the exception. Okay, and she documented why Nepalese are more successful in managing the commons than the private. And she got the Nobel Prize. So this is where we should be really ashamed. काम पनि गर्ने लेख्नु पनि नसक्ने र Nobel Prize पनि नपाउने. This is very unfair. Okay? But she came here, documented it, and got the Nobel Prize. So the point is, if you look at this land here, so there are basic principles you use in urban planning. Okay? So a city will be thriving if it is livable. So livability is the function. Livable when I care. That means when it rains, the water should go out. Okay? When you flush the toilet, the drain should work. In the morning, the garbage should be picked up. Okay? Livability. But livability is a function of management. So only if the city is managed, that it will be livable. But a city will be managed if it is bankable. Because if you don't have any revenue, how will you pay for management? If you don't have management, it will not be livable. So livability because of management, management because of bankability. Now in the case of Kathmandu, where would we get our bankability from? So for example, Beijing would do it by hosting the Olympics. Amsterdam does it by prostitution. Nevada by gambling. Okay, New York with the Twin Towers. Every city tries to use something to attract people. So what is Delhi using? The Commonwealth Games. So what does Patan have or Kathmandu Valley have that we others don't have? And it has heritage. Okay. So now look at this. If you manage our heritage, then you can get bankability. Bankability gives us management, and management gives us livability. Okay. So these are simple 4 words which I have used many times to get a lot of money. So Asian Development Bank, $12 million, 18% payback rate at 0.75% interest.
Wow.
So we could easily do the drains. Now fixing the drain is easy because it is a common property. And the Asian Development Bank would give a loan to fix it. Where would the revenue come from? It comes from all the revenue that is being generated through the heritage, including the tourist fee. Okay. Now, if you look across, you look at these houses, look at the private. You see the house is color-coded 2/3 and 1/3. It's been color-coded for you, 2/3 and 1/3. Why? Because the Nepali law says, if you don't own a piece of property, you are not a citizen. If you are not a citizen, you don't get a passport. So every generation the house is going to be divided again and again. So it is easier to save this road than the house. Which is a ridiculous law because if you use the same law in the United States, 80% of Americans would be sukumbati. Because they don't own property. But in Nepal, to have a citizenship, you have to have property. So this is the tragedy of the private. And this theory is what brought Eleanor Nobel Prize. Okay. Now look across here. You see the house. The first division is half, and the second division is 1/4, and it's color-coded for you again. So, heritage conservation must have a challenge not to save the commons, not to save the temples, but to save the private houses. And so, on the walk, one of the things we have to learn is how are we saving private houses, and not the monuments. The monuments have become easy to save, but the most difficult thing is to save private property. Okay? Now, when you go around the corner, we say democracy. So how does the West define democracy? It means Jimmy Carter coming and looking at the queue in the election booth. That's democracy. Or if you saw people lining up to vote, that means there is democracy. So when you don't have local government for 8 years, because the ward chairman and the mayor, they are also judges. They have judicial powers to resolve property disputes. So when it is just a simple division, this is the result. When it cannot be resolved, you'll see the result around the corner.